live. This is so. What a week. I don't think it should come as a surprise that people like Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, and Lauren Southern were
the fact that they're their own little Russian nesting dolls, if you will.
Now, it should be said that there is nothing in the indictment that indicates that they knew that they were being paid by Russians to spread the information. And I definitely believe that Tim Pool and Dave Rubin in particular are stupid enough to not connect the dots.
I mean, you know what? I will say that Dave Rubin is definitely stupid enough to not connect the dots, because that's a man who has not figured, who did not figure out that the leopards had not been fed, did not figure out that the leopards had been taken off their leash. He didn't realize the leopards were going to eat his face until they took off his ear. And even then,
Ben Shapiro's not coming to your dinner party, bro.
Like, why are you inviting BB Chirpage anyway? Why?
I don't know. There's a whole... With Dave Rubin, I definitely believe he's too stupid to connect the dots. In fact, he was smart enough to ask, okay, seriously, who's giving us this money? I want to know something about this guy. This is weird. Apparently, he asked, and like, I at least want to see something about this guy, Grigori. I can't remember, something Gregory, something vaguely European sounding name that's totally fake. I can't remember. But he basically was given this info sheet about that guy and looked at it, and he's the only problem with it that he had was apparently the guy did some, like, listed social justice as one of the aspects of the things he worked for. And that was almost a deal breaker for Dave Rubin, but not the suspicious, like, amount of money he wanted to. This Dave Rubin was being paid about,
I think, $100,000 a week or some shit.
$100,000 a week to produce content that these people wanted.
Then again, if you give white people $100,000 to be hateful, they probably would have done it for free. At least these people would have done it for free, but you know, it was just considered a bonus.
I mean, it's hilarious that it rankled at least some suspicion that he wanted to know who the guy was, and apparently fell for the thin layer of bullshit that said, "Oh, I'm totally a real person." But like, someone's paying you $100,000 a week for videos that don't get that many views.
Like, don't you want to know who you're doing your little voyeur peep show for? I mean, you're not exactly a Times Square. You're not exactly a Times Square performer being exposed for 12 seconds at a time for quarters here.
Yeah. Now, Tim Pool, on the other hand, didn't actually have to make any special material for this. They were satisfied to give him $100,000 a week
as is
for just the content he was already making. Like,
as is, because he was just shitting. Wasn't he just like shitting on Ukraine, just openly and wantonly?
So Russian disinformation was like, man, we'll just pay you this money for you to do you. You are doing everything we want you to do already.
Ready. Like,
that is shit.
Like, that's like a person at the server farm we don't have to pay.
And so, I'm going to say there's nothing alleging in any way that Tim Pool or Dave Rubin or Benny Johnson or Lauren Southern knew that they were paid Russian stooges. And I think with the case of Tim Pool and Dave Rubin, it's because they weren't smart enough to figure it out.
I'm willing to believe that if Lauren Southern, who already wrote about how right-wing alt-right men are sexist, you know, and she's getting $100K a week to continue to be an asshole and to lean further into it. Oh, I think that bitch knew.
she had already had half of her face eaten. And
Yeah.
she was like, I would like to serve up the other half,
Other
please,
half of the face. Might as well, bitch.
for
I'm
enough
not
money. Look, I got to tell you, between you and me and the 10 people that watch this, if someone were going to pay me $100,000 a week, I would say whatever the fuck they wanted me to say. I would sell out everybody.
I guess as someone who has already been adjacent to sex work, it's kind of like, do I really want to go and do that shit?
Key issue here is that Tim Pool especially has a lot of manosphere bullshit on his shows and has
Wait,
gone out of his way.
Isn't
He
Tim Pool gay? Isn't Tim Pool gay?
was Dave Rubin and possibly Nick Fuentes.
I
And
think Nick Fuentes. I think he likes dick, but he doesn't like the fact he likes dick. And
none of them
he's
like the fact that Dave Rubin is running from it full bore.
But he's like, he really doesn't like it.
I guarantee you that if Dave Rubin had come onto the scene as a conservative and didn't try to do the heel face turn, he would have never been out. But he was already out by the time that he found it profitable to become an apostate from the left. So I think it was
I think somebody broke that man. I think somebody broke that man's heart, and he's never going to take that shit well. There,
but to go back, Tim Pool has openly done this manosphere carrying. He had the fresh and fit guys on a show talking about high value men and all that shit. And one of the things he does, he talked about.
You know what? I can't stand manosphere gays. There, I said it. Manosphere gays.
Tim Pool isn't gay as far as we know, but he still, all the same, has gone on recently speaking about one of the Olympians who had an OnlyFans and like called her a whore, used the word whore over and over again. Really put the stink on that word. And,
I'm sorry, she's using her body now. She just discovered another way to use it. Motherfucker.
And part of that is
some of these countries are not paying these athletes.
Well, that's the point. But to get back to it, it's just that he was really laying into it. And he was doing the whole thing where he'd say the word whore, but also say, not that there's anything wrong with it, when it's clear he's putting the judgment on the word. But the fact is, what Tim Pool is doing in putting out content for the Russians for $100,000 a week, that is what being a whore is.
Yes, it is. Very high class. I guess because he figures because he's a high class whore, it don't count. Sir, it counts. It's just a question of how you're selling your body and for how much. I mean, she, on the other hand, is doing the honest work of working out for a sport and performing acts of pleasure on digital media for people to pay her. That's pretty straightforward, honest work to me.
It would. There's the element of it that she, we'll never know for sure if she's doing it because she really loves doing it or because of the financial crunch of the fact that these athletes are paid absolute dog shit. And there's also the fact that OnlyFans has an income inequality curve for the content creators on it that is just as steep as it is for the rest of the industry. Yeah. And there's, of course, a lot of exploitation there as well. But I think the point is that the content creators for OnlyFans are selling their bodies in the same ways that you and I are selling our bodies to the people who give us our paycheck to spend 40 hours or more a week doing what makes them more money than it makes us.
Yeah, it's a case of I do not have the emotional energy. Listen, I do my job because I do not have the emotional energy or the marketing savvy for sex work. There. That's all it is. Like, in my case, I don't have the emotional energy or the marketing savvy. Because honestly, I think about 35% of sex work is marketing. Another 25 is general bookkeeping, legal, and financial. Another 35 is amateur armchair therapist, and then the rest of that, and then probably maybe 15% of the act of being of sex work is actual sex.
Legalize, regulate, unionize.
Because honestly, I would love to be an office manager for a hose union. For a hose union.
The shop steward.
I don't know if I don't think that would require me coming back to going to the field full time. Because I don't think I could be a shop steward if I being out of it for so long though.
Does the shop steward also have to be one of the floor workers?
I think I believe for hotel unions, I think you have to have some years in. I think so. I think for certain occupations, I believe for hotel unions, you have to have some years in. And I wouldn't feel like I was doing anything. I wouldn't feel like I deserved respect if I didn't.
I like the idea of an office manager, though. I mean, that works.
Oh, yeah.
Bookkeeping for the hose union.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, I mean, if nothing else, the idea of probably also, it also involving some historian type work. Because honestly,
the local 6969, it writes itself.
Like, honestly, that's one LGBTQ history and history of sex work is one of those underrated forms of history that no one thinks is actually history, but God alone knows it's history.
They don't call it the oldest profession for nothing. Look, you want
that part.
Like you want like the signs of the first like solid civilization. It's the first place you find a whorehouse and a bar.
Exchanging of goods for pleasure and exchanging of goods for intoxication.
Absolutely.
Sounds about right.
Really, you need two bars because you need a bar that you want to go to because I wouldn't be caught dead in the other bar.
That's the question. That would be the question. Like, this is where I would need Ian Nasir's entire bookkeeping setup to see what he was doing. Ian Nasir, for anybody who knows their history, he was a copper merchant in Babylon. The only reason we even know this individual person is that man got yelped from here and back for how shitty his copper was.
Yeah, it's the earliest written complaint, right?
Yes. I love the fact that everyone talks about he doesn't take returns. He fucking sucks. I bought this copper item from him. It was trash. Fuck this guy and fuck this guy. Fuck his camel. Fuck everything about him.
What I really love about that story is it helps illustrate the axiom that the more things change, the more things stay the same. It's certain, it's certain that human nature and human society doesn't really change in the day-to-day functioning all that much, to the point it reminds me of someone talking about antiques and rarities that are found in archaeological sites, and people saying these things are rare and precious to us because they're stories of the past. But in the past, these were just the average, ordinary tools of everyday life, and they barely had value. They were just functional for the most part.
Yeah, it's like that ancient 9th century Russian kid and his like notebook. That Russian kid in his notebook, like everybody's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe this kid's drawings. It's such an insight into the past." I'm like, that is a 9-year-old boy drawing himself as a knight stabbing people, sir.
I mean, archaeologically, who knows what random, like, 6-year-old's fridge drawing might survive into the distant future.
Oh, God. I'm just thinking about the fact that there's going to be a lot of explaining a lot of things they are not going to understand. even if we go into the world of digital archaeology, you think they're going to understand badger?
I mean, I think they might. It's in the same way that we have been able to figure out ancient jokes. Like, I wish I could remember what it was, but it was like, ancient Greek, or an ancient Greek joke that we don't actually get as a joke, but it's clearly a joke because it holds the structure of a joke.
Okay.
That kind of thing. I really wish, there's so much like surface level shit I barely remember, and I really wish I were better at making the reference to
Yeah,
this.
but I know, but yeah,
Yes, ancient Testicles once said of the.
Yeah, you got to hang low or you can't hang at all. So that's probably how that joke went, my best guess. But it's a case where I know certain things feel like they're going to endure, such as Charlie the Unicorn. I'm sorry, Shun the Unbeliever it's eternal. Shun the Unbeliever, shun. If you do, like, I have a feeling 3,000 years in the future, they will see Charlie the Unicorn and instantly understand where we were going with that.
I really would love, and kudos to our restraint for not mentioning it last week for the first time in months, but I'm gonna bring it back. I really would love for archaeologists 400 years from now to talk about, like, not much about popular culture of the Americas exists, but we do see this one thing, something involving beef between Kendrick and Drake. I don't know what livestock has to do with it, but
yeah, we found these ancient recordings. They're very rhythmic and very catchy. I think somebody's accusing the other one of being a child lover. It's very, very high. It was treated as some of the most high level humor. There might be some double, triple, quintuple entendres in there.
And as an Italian, I definitely appreciate that he called him a wop. The
fact that the WAP also has multiple levels.
Yeah.
It's like you brought back an old, well, I mean, we probably should have seen WAP coming because he said jabroni ass niggas.
Yeah.
If
there's also, I mean, not to get too far aside, but that old timey anti-European racism is making a comeback with JD Vance.
I know
some of that old anti-Irish shit.
Like, I have not, like, I'm like, we talked about this hatred in history class. He is opening the classics.
We've got too many Huns coming into the United States.
Like, sir, you're talking about Tim Waltz being a German Lutheran? Are we really doing this today? I don't even own a bustle. I don't own a farthingale. I don't own none of that. This hair cannot Gibson itself. I can't Gibson none of this. So what are we doing by calling
back
this
to the racism for people who are white now?
Yeah, like, this is the point where I'm like, we're not even part of this conversation, but I'm sitting here like, this man is using shit that's like, I don't own a Spencer jacket or a bustle, sir. You need to bring it back. Bring it back. It's not that I want to be the center of attention. We want to be the center of attention. It's just, you are going back to racism so old that you've already imagined a world without us, and that is terrifying. I think that's what happens when I think that's what Black people realize when you're going to racism so old that it involves just simply white people against other white people.
Oh my goodness. It's definitely like the whole he's not from around here thing. Like,
I live for that.
When we're talking about, this just ancient internecine conflicts.
Yeah, it's gonna be like ancient white people. Yeah, it's gonna be like, and then somehow I can see some historian of racism like, and then somehow these internecine Caucasian conflicts came back into fashion. What?
Oh my gosh.
We're really doing this today? But here we are. We are actually doing the groups of white people hating each other thing.
And it's all basically boils down to whether or not they eat cabbage, or if they do, how they eat cabbage. That's really all it all
Or as I like to call it, butter Europe versus oil Europe. Butter Europe versus oil Europe.
Is that different from tomato Europe versus potato Europe?
I think it's in the same vein.
Like one's like east west, one's north south.
Yeah, well, but here's the thing: butter Europe versus oil Europe to me feels a little bit more accurate, because tomatoes and potatoes didn't really come around till like the 14, 15, 1600s, and by then a lot of these hatreds were already baked in. So that's why I always seed all the roll it all the way back to butter Europe versus oil Europe. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. This is just something that, you pick up. You realize you can't really say butter. You can't really say potato versus tomato because it doesn't go back far enough.
Then again, like butter versus oil is more of a less geographic and more of a class sort of thing. I mean, even
it could be. It could be.
I mean, butter, you had money for cows and stuff like that. And oil, you had your olive trees.
I don't think of it as much. I don't think of it as class as much as geographic. Or you could probably say beer Europe versus wine Europe.
Ooh.
But then it gets really weird. But then it gets really awkward. Because then you've got Ouzo, and what the fuck, Ouzo and Sambuca, and what the fuck do you do with that?
God.
Ouzo, Sambuca, vodka. Then it gets like, should we go dark liquor Europe versus clear liquor Europe? But then you have gin. So it's a thing. Like, that's why I always fall back on potato versus. This is why I always fall back on butter Europe versus oil Europe.
Potato.
Literally.
So
I can't believe we actually discussed internecine white people feuds going all the way back to Europe, and which way should we define them?
I love white on white racism. It is hilarious.
I admit I like it from a spectator point of view, but it always makes me realize, okay, y'all are getting as a
Scotch, Irish, Italian. I love it.
I kind of think it's always the point where, as a black person, I'm like, this is gutting so fine point. We're not even in the picture. Oh my God, y'all are.
So you're sort of like Seth Rogen in that scene where he's watching the gay couple fight in Zack and Miri Make a Porno, where he's just like, I love this.
Like, you know what? Yeah, if it's on a small scale of two people fighting in the bar, will I try to make it worse between the two? Possibly. Depending on who pissed me off previously. Or I could see if there's any indigenous people in the room and see who they're siding with, and then take the side with them, just so that we can just make it even more violent. And
so one of you would be, okay, let's break, and the other would be, no, but let it.
Yes, it's gonna be like, no. Let it cook. Yeah, it's the question where they would turn to be like, no, let it cook. Let it cook. This is about to get good. Get out the way, because there might be a chair thrown. I've seen this before. It's a question where, yeah, at some point you're going to need somebody indigenous or Asian in order to, like, either help narrate, especially if you got there late. If you get there late, you're like, no, I'm going to need to know, how did we get here?
So in order to, I guess, we've padded the beginning of the episode enough so that we can talk about something serious without starting from a down position, which is yet another school shooting, this time in Georgia.
I'm tired.
2 students and 2 teachers dead. I believe up to 30 wounded.
Yes.
And I think a key part of the story is that a school resource officer actually
did
the
their job.
Yeah.
Actually did their job. Now the Republicans going to be riding that till kingdom come.
It's one of the first things libs of TikTok did was talk about, a resource officer stopped the school shooter. Kamala wants to take them out of the schools.
Well, that's because for everyone like that motherfucker, there's like at least 45 others like Scott Israel. So
Uvalde
really, what
and Parkland come to mind.
So what are we doing here?
Yeah,
like
and
that.
Not to mention that better informative people like us have discussed at length the fact that school resource officers criminalize basically childish and bad behavior.
It criminalizes the rough parts of being an adolescent.
Yeah.
It criminalizes the rough parts of adolescence, and is that really something you want? Then again, usually if you have a lot of the school resource officers, to me, are truly a mixed bag. You have did I know of school resource officers that were creepers? I knew some that kind of danced on that line.
Yeah.
I mean, I think every girl knows a girl who knows a girl that the school resource officer might have said something that really, should they have said that?
Yeah. It's an opportunity to criminalize things that don't need to be criminalized. That other schools handle without criminalization.
Exactly. And it brings an opportunity for, let's be honest, we all talk about, one bad apple. They're mostly bad apples, guys. 40%. Let's not act like we have had way too many stories of cops sexually preying on underage people for us to act like exactly the dog knows what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, in serious agreement.
Sirius has seen it. Sirius knows what he's talking about. He's seen that shit.
Sirius is in serious agreement. Yes.
So I mean, yeah, you can talk about this one school resource officer.
That's the key. That is the key.
Out of how many? They're trying to spread the story that this kid might have been trans, as always. Like, one tweet tried it, and everyone's like, are you really here doing this? Go.
I mean, they tried it with Uvalde.
Yes.
And the fact that the one in Tennessee is likely or confirmed to be, I can't keep track of it, someone who is trans. And the fact that
one of how many hundreds?
That's just it. Like in the one of two things I ever wrote on our dormant and unused Substack, I went through the statistics that even in the light most favorable to these assholes who are making the argument that there's somehow disproportionate trans representation in violent mass shootings, there isn't.
No. They're more likely to be victims than they're more likely to be victims than perpetrators.
Well, exactly.
So,
at this school officer, I'm not going to say to someone who did something pretty brave and heroic, yeah, congratulations on doing your job. Seriously, thank you for doing your job. It's more to the fact that, this is what policing should be. If resource officers are going to be a thing, they should basically just sit in a room all day and not interact with the kids unless something happens.
Like that, I'm sorry, I hate to say it. He's established the bar, which is, we don't want to see you, hear you, or even know you exist until shit gets real.
And it's like the one cop in Uvalde who basically was nearly disciplined for trying to do the right thing and tried to get, and eventually was the one who I believe finally breached, was like, I'm not going to sit here saying congratulations on finally doing your job. Seriously, thank you. Thank you for doing the right thing. But the fact is, this is just fully showing the rarity of the right thing happening shows how systemic a problem is. That's why I always say, fuck the police, fuck a fireman.
I I've already done the latter. It was I wouldn't say don't do it, but I would say really think about what you're doing there.
In celebration of September 11th, fuck a fireman.
Yeah, but don't give that dude your real name, because all firefighters are frustrated cops. Firefighters are frustrated cops. They're the reason they're frustrated cops. They're just cops that didn't get to be cops, and you can take that as you will.
Mall security and those guys.
I've heard this from a fireman, that firemen are just frustrated cops and cops are frustrated firemen, and I'm like, no, I don't think cops are frustrated firemen, because
I don't know if that's more just like a jokey generalization, because firemen run into danger.
This is true, but when
not only that, but they run into certain danger.
That part, like, and I will admit, Senator the Clob posting yearly her photo with the firefighters of the Twin Cities is hilarious.
Oh, she is one of the most horny politicians.
I love her. I shouldn't love her, but I do. She's like, yep, posted with the firefighters. I'm like, ma'am, you just out here thirst posting on Maine. What are we doing?
I mean, politically, she's pretty, she's just a standard Democrat. I'm not excited by her, but, and people are posting stories about how hard she is to work for, but like.
Yeah, but like I said, you call it pro-union, but man, that is just simply thirst posting.
Oh yeah, she knew it was.
Start posting with.
We knew what she was doing.
Like thirst posting with "look for the union label." Like, honestly, it's like, ma'am, we all knew that you were trying to do no unions, and we were like, no, bitch, that's thirst posting. We have all been on the internet long enough to know what we're looking at. And you got Tina Smith involved. Oh no, that was y'all thirst posting with your girlfriends. Y'all went with your girlfriends and decided, oh wait, I'm a senator. I better take some pictures. Hey, firefighters! 2 birds with 1 stone. You know what? I think the Clob is amusing, and I think the Clob is adorable, and I appreciate her every year for doing that so hard duty of going to the Minnesota State Fair and taking pictures with firefighters.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want her to be president or vice president, but I appreciate her. And that's the thing. Like, by the time someone gets to the position where they could be president, I know I'm not going to like them as president. It's one of these sort of situations. The reason I'm excited about Kamala Harris is because I think she has the capability to win. I don't think she's going to be a great president. I know by the end of her time in office, I'm going to have the same criticisms.
You're going to hate her. You're going to
of Joe Biden, of Obama, of Clinton. I don't like these people, but the fact is that she has the ability to win, and she may continue a lot of the more domestic policies that I did find positive about Joe Biden.
Yeah, I just think it's cute that she thinks she can raise our hope on changing business as usual with the problem child.
She's probably going to govern a little bit more to the right than Biden, but she's probably not going to do that hard center pivot that I think a lot of people are expecting of her, especially the choice in Tim Walz, because I don't think you choose someone like Tim Walz just to signal moves to the left economically. That's one of those things where you want a, this isn't the days of needing a regionally balanced ticket, even though I'm sure that the Midwest was key and it was going to be someone from the Midwest or the Sun Belt. So I get, to a certain extent, like, it was regionally conscious, but not regionally balanced. There was an ideological component at work.
Yes.
Here. And I think that you're not going to be someone who governs from the hard center, like Obama turned out to, although people will say he's a socialist communist. But
socialists don't acknowledge him, so I don't know where we're going with that.
And that's the thing, people say, yeah, but the Obamacare. I'm like, Obamacare was basically Romney Care. Let's not pretend that it was some big left-wing thing.
With the serial numbers filed off.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, but like we could go back in time when being a Republican meant that you had to basically wink and nod at New Deal politics. And
And
now to be a Democrat means you have to wink and nod at centrism and light conservatism.
yeah,
We have moved that Overton window far to the right
far
from
to
where
the
it
right.
was.
Yeah. The fact that we have to actually kind of like, the fact that I'm like, every time I hear the Supreme Court convening, I'm like, hey, I wonder what rights I'm going to lose this time.
Yeah. This is why I'm really glad that Kamala Harris is openly talking about Supreme Court reform. I mean,
And I mean,
it's
yeah, because I mean, I think about the fact that the closest person that I ever heard come close to it, and maybe I'm showing my bias here, but I know Pete talked about it. He obliquely said, maybe we could stand a couple more justices. I don't know. And I remember I, at that point, lost my entire shit and said, I will march through hell for that man.
Yeah.
Because
When it comes to the national office, I care about getting elected, and that's why I thought initially, before I knew that she was looking for governors in particular, I thought Pete Buttigieg would be the best vote choice because I thought he would be the most positive effect on the ticket. I don't like him as the idea of president because I think he's too much of
I think
a
he's young.
cipher who is,
I think he's too young,
he's
and
got the
and
stamp
we
of McKinsey on him, and
and we haven't seen him in a national legislative position like senator, governor, etc., etc. We haven't seen that side of him yet. And as a result, I really couldn't. I had a feeling she wasn't going to choose him. I was terrified she was going to choose Mark Kelly because I'm like, Mark Kelly is
he is a
anti-charisma.
charisma vacuum.
He's anti-charisma.
Jinx, owe me some coke. But like he was a charisma vacuum. But on top of which, I think I mentioned when we were talking about the short list over a month ago of possibilities, I may have mentioned I don't like his anti-union votes and the fact that he changed his mind after he was added to the short list. Frankly, I'd have had more respect of him when he said, no, I still don't support the PRO Act because. And that's why when Josh Shapiro came out and doubled down on his business tax cut, I was like, I don't agree with it, but I appreciate.
But at least he's doing. At least he's screwing his courage to the sticking post, and he meant that shit.
Yeah, basically.
At least he meant that shit. It's dumb shit. It's
Mark
stupid
Kelly was
shit.
At the absolute bottom of my list, and even though Josh Shapiro, his positions on schools and his
I'm kind of glad. I'm really glad it wasn't Shapiro for a lot of
he's
reasons.
better for Pennsylvania as a governor because he's going to, when he's up for re-election, he is seriously going to impact the down ballot Pennsylvania votes.
Yeah,
in a way
he's going to probably going to keep Pennsylvania blue in a lot of ways, and he's probably going to. I think. I just need to know. Can Malcolm Kenyatta stand being in the same room as Josh Shapiro or no?
I don't actually know on a personal level how that works out, but Malcolm Kenyatta doesn't strike me as the type of person that would hold the kind of grudge that would weigh the party down.
Okay.
Josh Shapiro, on the other hand, does seem like that type of motherfucker. Because you get the impression from his meeting with Kamala Harris and what's leaked out about it, that he's more of a careerist than anything, and that he holds a grudge. But that's fine. He's at the top of the state, so people have to accommodate him. He doesn't have to accommodate
anybody. And I think that was something that Kamala saw and said, "Nah, I'm not going to compete with this motherfucker. Well, I don't got time for that."
Ultimately, if you're Kamala Harris, you want someone who's never going to undermine you. Frankly, Joe Biden undermined Obama, as vice president, on occasion. And I think Kamala Harris sees, it's part of the reason why people are mad, that Kamala Harris isn't more forcefully breaking from Biden. But I don't know, does Kamala Harris, the current vice president, want to act like vice presidents can go against the current administration?
She doesn't have the energy to be that experiment.
I think she wants to signal to her vice president that my administration is your point of view.
Yeah.
So let her chart her own course once she gets elected and has her own administration. I realize that there's a lot of people who are saying the genocide's going on now. And it's like, I almost said Obama. Biden is ideologically fixed on Gaza. He is not changeable.
Yeah.
Because
No,
all of the
like-
arguments that have been made to change his mind have already been made. We forget Anthony Blinken. I keep saying Anthony. I know it's Anthony. Anthony Blinken, like on October 8th,
right after
that we needed the discussion of a ceasefire in order to facilitate a hostage transfer, and they made him take that shit down immediately. Now, if he were a principal man and he should have fucking quit, but the point is,
but here
this
we
is
are.
Biden's ideology, and he's clearly immovable. And our past experience seeing him and the stuff that has come out in the past about his ideology on Israel, the fact that he made Begin have to say to him, "We can't do that." When he said, "You should just go in and basically blow who cares how many civilians you kill after Lebanon?" And Begin, of all people, had to say,
"Hey, slow your roll, fam.
You need to cool your jets.
Slow your roll. Slow your roll."
Yeah. And the fact is, there are people, and I know really we're getting far afield from what we were originally talking about.
Very
but I do
far.
need to talk about it after the last 6 hostages were executed by Hamas. That this, as always, did not need to happen, given the fact that what we have seen from Netanyahu's own negotiating team and his Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant.
Like that. Yes, I believe that was the
I think it's Minister of Defense, or it might be another one of a different minister, like War Cabinet. He's on the War Cabinet, but basically have all said that he not only is he not prioritizing hostages, he is actively sabotaging the ceasefire hostage negotiations. When we have heard Anthony Blinken say that Israel has agreed to the deal, now Hamas needs to, stop holding things up. We have seen, and it has come out both times that he has made that statement, first in July and then more recently, that Israel had never agreed to anything.
To a goddamn thing.
And Hamas comes to the table saying that we can agree to this framework. So I don't look. Hamas are terrorists, and I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. But I don't see the need to, in any way, say that Netanyahu is in any way more trustworthy on the matter. Because
for me, it's just a matter of that this is that collective punishment and disproportional retribution is just another tactic. And at this point, I don't really. It's Netanyahu, just like how Donald Trump is running for re-election in order to save himself. Netanyahu is running this war just to save himself.
Well, they're two narcissists in a pod.
Yeah, and if for him holding on to power with his dirty little fingernails for another 2 years means that Gaza goes down, oh well then. And that's the part that I think everybody really needs to they need to accept the fact that I think at this time you've got to start thinking. I'm hoping there's more back channeling than the House of Cards going on right now.
I mean, it's been leaked that the U.S. is considering unilateral discussions with Hamas without Israel.
Bitch, I wish they would. I would as much as we don't negotiate with terrorists, as much as sexy as that Bushian philosophy is, I'm tired. Everyone's tired.
It's an unrealistic romanticization of what terrorism is. It's this idea that we can defeat all enemies by force and force alone. Realistically, you can't. I'm sorry.
No, you can't. But it's the idea that we can finally just say, y'all don't want. It's like, listen, we believe that the Israeli people want peace. Netanyahu does not. We're just going to negotiate around this motherfucker because we're tired.
And the change has to come at home, and we've seen it happen in the United States because Israel is in a constant state of basically what we saw post 9/11. After 9/11, George W. Bush had a 93% approval rating. Recently, because 9/11 is coming up, some places are posting clips. Recently, I saw the clip of him at Ground Zero the day after. And even knowing the horrors that Bush brought on the world after that, it still is almost, it's impossible not to feel a little bit
Yeah.
stirred by the sort of,
And then
you
you
know,
realize
I
that
hear you, the world hears
world
you,
hears
and
you,
soon
and
the people
soon
who
the
knock
people
the
who
building
knock down
down.
these towers will hear you. Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. The speech from the rebel is probably one of the better pieces of modern day impromptu political speechifying. It's one of the better.
And but
It's
it
good.
speaks to the human nature to want righteousness and to
Yeah.
gravitate towards righteousness.
Yes.
And a cause that feels righteous stirs people.
And
Right
it's
now,
also the fact, and when
95% of Jewish Israelis either feel that this was back in January when the study was done. It could have.
yeah, I think things might have changed because as it's coming out, that it's coming out more and more that Netanyahu is just simply delaying, submarining, self-sabotaging just to stay in office longer, and the Israeli people are getting tired.
It's hard to bring a society back from the brink of right-wing fascism, which is where Israel is and has been for several decades now. And I say several decades because a lot of people want to paint Israel as this fascist idea. Let's not forget that the Nakba occurred under a left-wing government. So this is not so, like, you can't blame everything on fascism, but I mean, they're basically post 9/11 United States right now. And they've been that way for a while. And the culture can shift.
And I mean, I just think of them as just a nation of trauma survivors that did not do all of the work in therapy.
Yeah.
There.
And not that it's their fault, because the government re-traumatizes them. And that's kind of constantly the point of this.
Yeah, it's a government and yes, the Israeli state probably it knows that keeping them in trauma, keeping them on a near constant war footing, keeping them reminded of the 6-day war, keeping them reminded of all these things is going to make it easier for somebody like Netanyahu to hold on to office, like basically since we both started college the first time.
Yeah, what was it, 1996, the first time he became prime minister? Or was it 94? Then he was out. And it was
then since we were in high school. Since we were in high school.
Yeah.
Since we were in basically, this man's been prime minister for the majority of the years since we were in high school.
Yeah. So there is an economic collapse that might occur in Israel due to the fact that the army and the reserves have been, they've been away from their jobs. They've been away from home. They're not purchasing. Their, businesses are closing. Tourism is drying up. The possible economic collapse of Israel may be the thing that tips this war over more than any kind of external economic.
But tips it over where?
Well, I don't. You could. I hesitate to say you can't go further right than this. It's always possible it could get a lot worse. But it's also possible that people could say, "We have had the fuck enough." I mean,
we're tired.
The protests in Tel Aviv overwhelmingly are more about wanting to get the hostages back than the humanity of Gaza. But all the same, it's creeping in.
Yeah, it's the idea that what are we all doing this for? Like, is everybody in the world wrong for looking at us askance for continuing this campaign? What, or are we overreacting?
I mean, we never learned our lesson from Iraq because we were so sheltered by it.
Yeah,
we didn't have to see the cost to our own lives of the 200,000 to 1 million Iraqis. That it's really unknown that how many were killed directly or indirectly by us, but at a minimum, it's 200,000. That's the most conservative estimate of Iraqis killed by the United States. We were sheltered from that, and we, for many, many years, long after people try to retcon it and say that they didn't support the war. This country supported that war for a while.
We did. Yeah, we really had a real, yeah.
Yeah. So our reckoning from that has never really happened. So I don't think you can judge the fact that we went more fascist with Trump. Now Trump is responsible for fewer deaths in that regard, but all the same, he is a lot more fascist.
Yeah.
And so who knows what reckoning might bring us back from this fascist brink. But with Israel, I think it's a lot more acute because it's their
It's
backyard.
They see it. There's they see it. They see that there are people who might be living in what used to be somebody else's house or farming somebody else's land, and this is somebody they know.
And that's something I also want to, I think, go enough because there's the power imbalance between the type of people who are anti-Zionist, and there's the people who walk around with the Hamas flags and talk about, like, the ending Israel, and it's like, go fuck yourself, you fucking psychopath. But like, those people have no institutional power. They're not the people making the decisions in the same way that pro-Israeli people are making the decisions that end the lives of tens of thousands of Gazans. But when it comes to sort of, I wouldn't say, like, whatever solution to this situation with Palestinians and the occupation, it has to end with absolutely zero forced displacement of anybody. And the ICJ or the ICC, issued this, sort of advisory opinion saying that Israel needs to remove the settlers from the West Bank. I'm like, I get it, but you're talking about 750,000 people, and many of them are generations deep. Like, I think about
they've already been there, yeah.
New, but at least like 100,000 of them are like 3 generations deep. You cannot force the grandchildren of people who did horrible things to move en masse. You just can't. You're not. The solution to the Nakba isn't another Nakba, no matter how orderly it may be. Yeah. In fact, orderly just probably makes it worse in some ways.
I hate to say it, or this is one of the few times where orderly is not going to be a good visual here.
Yeah, but so the solution to this problem, as always, is going to have to be diplomatic. It is not going to have to be war. And if we're talking about, Israel has done everything it can, leadership-wise, of course, to make the two-state solution impossible by a policy of deliberately breaking up the contiguity of the West Bank through its settlements and through its walls and highways and bisection of different areas. That doesn't mean two-state solution is so impossible.
And creating a weird pass system, and that is it's giving South Africa.
When people say that there can't be a diplomatic solution, I say that, well, South Africa had the end of South Africa was through financial pressure, external financial pressure that basically made it impossible to continue apartheid. And there was no big retribution after South Africa, in part because of Truth and Reconciliation Commissions and the fact that they made a society that, for the most part, got rid of apartheid. You can't get rid of all the vestiges of something like that. You can't erase inequality overnight. And it's still not equal, but you can't. But when you get rid of the officially sanctioned government-sponsored oppression,
it makes it a lot easier to make a lot of the informal social distinctions kind of fade.
I mean, groups like Hamas and Hezbollah exist because of actions of oppression, mass death, and destruction. You can't erase them through that. It's just like you can't make Iraq a democracy in the way we tried to do it without creating ISIS.
That was why did we think we could do that?
A diplomatic end that involves either two states, a Jewish state and a Palestinian state, or one state that is no longer either Jewish state, but a single binational state in the area, which I know a lot of people in Israel don't want, but like it's going to have to be one or the other sooner or
The
later.
other,
And the
yeah.
two-state solution is the one that allows you to keep the national identity that you want. So you better start working hard for that.
For the two-state solution, because
if
honestly, that's the
international
close.
pressure makes one state happening, there is no Jewish state. And I
Jewish.
know people say, well, that means genocide. But going back to what was said about
Not
South
really,
Africa,
no.
it just means that there is a state that has basically the largest Jewish population in the world. But that's why you should try really fucking hard to make a two-state solution happen.
Yeah,
and that
because
involves
at least you get to
the 1967 borders into the state, and whatever Jewish residents still live in the settlements, if they want to stay there, we can guarantee through either the threat of sanctions, but also through aid and incentives to make sure that Palestine respects the rights of the Jewish settlers who still live there now, as long as everybody has equal rights, representation, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Same with any Palestinians who live within the borders of Israel. It's a solution.
It's a push. It's a push, but it can't. But it's a push, but it's not impossible to do. But I can still see that's still not going to please everybody. It'll please more people than it'll displease, which is probably one of the only upsides that I can see with it.
Ultimately, as long as there is no forced relocation, then there is a solution. Because as I said, the people who are going around with the sign and say, like, end Israel, blah, blah, go fuck yourself, you fucking psychopath. There's 750,000 settlers inside the West Bank. You cannot solve the Nakba with another Nakba. You just can't. So the solution
you're just going to create the whole cycle again. And while I know the history of that region loves its cycles, the rest of us aren't as infatuated with the concept.
I mean, those cycles really aren't that old No,
they're not, but we're all tired of it already. Honestly.
Well, it's the way that, when it comes to the Native Americans, we've pretty much essentially completed that genocide as a nation. They barely, there is no chance for a resistance from the Native Americans to our genocide.
And for every Hawaiian nationalist who talks independence, and they do exist,
it's solved through reparations, and that's pretty much how it's going to be solved. Reparations for Native Americans, reparations for divested Hawaiians, reparations for basically Puerto Rico as a whole, whose economy has been vacuumed out of it by venture capitalists. Reparations for Black Americans, reparations for Asian Americans. You're not going to. It's sort of like when people talk about like, oh my gosh, there is no solution that is going to be one solution. It is a series of small solutions.
It's going to be a case of a bunch of legal reforms that's going to have to be enacted in a proper order, or else the whole thing will go to shit and it'll just be walking around half done.
Yeah.
Wasn't that happy?
Well, in a way, it was kind of optimistic. We talked about a potential future that sees, an autonomous state.
A possible autonomous, which would be great for everybody involved. No one wants. I mean, I know some people don't think that that's possible or don't think that that's a good idea, but I think that would be probably the safest thing for everybody involved. I mean, in the end, it's the most workable because Jewish people are not going to give up their identity or their
and they fucking shouldn't.
They shouldn't have to.
And well, when people talk about the risk of reprisals if there is a fully autonomous Palestinian state, I just remind him that the racial violence that occurred after the end of the Civil War and the freeing of the slaves was not the slaves against the former slavers.
Slave owners. It was just remind him. Yeah, like you're like Wilmington, the Wilmington massacre, the flooding out of places like Vanport and Oscarville, which led to Lake Lanier. By the way, Lake Lanier did close out summer as she should.
Another victim.
Of course. Like I said, every year Lake Lanier doesn't. Every year that Nia DaCosta or Jordan Peele does not sit down to give us the Lake Lanier movie we deserve is an L.
Oh, you know what? I didn't realize what time it was or how close it was, but let's talk quickly about Mark Robinson.
Oh, Mark Robinson. Could the it's the North Carolina. Could the North Carolina GOP have made a worse mistake?
No, they could not have. Well, he is basically the Doug Mastriano of North Carolina.
He is the Doug Mastriano of Herschel Walker's. Like, honestly, guys,
is this like a long-term psyop for Republicans to basically?
I don't know. I feel like that this is a long-term. Like, I've never seen such a slow public suicide of a slow public suicide, attempted suicide, or such an embarrassing slide into fascism, depending on which side depending on the outcome of this whole thing. Like, I've never seen such an embarrassing slide into fascism or such a prolonged, embarrassing public suicide. Like,
I'm just stunned at the news that came out today that he used to not buy porn, but show up for the free previews at this local adult shop. He would watch the free previews.
He's the kind of dude that would probably record back when cable used to scramble the adult channels. He probably still recorded it just to catch a glimpse of a titty.
And it's always a titty. It's never plural.
Both titties. It's like, that's what he was hoping. Like, this is the kind of person who would absolutely order SpectraVision and then lie and say he didn't mean to.
Well, to that end,
like, he's a sleaze, and he's the worst kind of sleaze. He's a cheap sleaze.
We'll have more to talk about as that gubernatorial race gets towards.
And next week is the debate week, so that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. But in the meantime, I wish you all a happy Unscrambled Spice Channel. And this just in, David Zaslav somehow still alive. God damn it.
Ruining.
Why do you call it Max? What is Max?